Prayers. Almighty God, without whose help labor is useless, without whose light search is vain, we thine unworthy servants here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thine heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our deliberations, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the results of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name. Amen.
Mr. Speaker, time is past 10. I therefore want to move that we suspend S252 so the business of the House will commence.
Any seconder to that motion?
I so second, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, all in favor of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.
Record of votes and proceedings for Thursday, 23rd July 2020.
Honorable members, excuse me. Honorable members, we shall now consider the votes and proceedings of our 8th meeting held on Thursday, 23rd of July. We shall skip pages 1 through to 4 and start our consideration of the votes and proceedings from page 5. Any amendments or comments? Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Last page, page 10. Can someone please move?
I so move, Mr. Speaker.
Any seconder?
I so second, Mr. Speaker.
All in favor say aye. We want to know who the seconder was. All those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.
Record of votes and proceedings for Thursday, 23rd July 2020 has been adopted.
Bill, the Supplementary Appropriation Act 2020. Introduction and first reading. The Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, honorable members of Parliament, I move that the bill entitled the Supplementary Appropriation Act 2020, being an act to make revisions and supplementary provision for the services of Sierra Leone for the fiscal year 2020, be read the first time.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill entitled the Supplementary Appropriation Act 2020, being an act to make revisions and supplementary provision for the services of Sierra Leone for the year 2020, be read the first time. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.
The bill entitled the Supplementary Appropriation Act 2020 has been read the first time. Second reading.
Mr. Speaker, honorable members of Parliament, I move that the bill entitled the Supplementary Appropriation Act 2020 be read the second time. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, on the 8th of November 2019, I presented to this noble House government budget and statement of economic and financial policies for the financial year 2020 with the theme Fiscal Consolidation for Human Capital Development. This House graciously approved the budget on the 18th of December 2019. The 2020 budget aims at consolidating the gains made during the first year of implementing our medium-term development plan. It lays out strategies to sustain fiscal consolidation in order to safeguard macroeconomic stability, continued investment in human capital, and propose targeted interventions aimed at creating job opportunities, especially for our youth and women. Another important element of those strategies is the clearance of legacy arrears owed to suppliers and contractors. The aim was to enhance the credibility of government and safeguard the stability of the banking system. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, sadly enough, barely a month into the implementation of the 2020 budget, the outbreak of the coronavirus disease, COVID-19, was reported in China. The disease spread quickly across the world within a very short period, and by late February 2020, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 as a global pandemic. The widespread disruptions from COVID-19 to global health and economic activity had spillover effect on our economy during January to March 2020. In particular, the weak economic activity in our major trading economies, especially China and Europe, and the consequent collapse of commodity prices were already having a severe impact on our export. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, building on the lessons from the Ebola health crisis, government took preemptive measures even before we recorded the index case on 31st March 2020. Consistent with international best practices in fighting such pandemics, government adopted several containment measures, including suspension of international flights, closure of borders, partial lockdowns, restrictions on inter-district movements, ban on public gatherings, night curfews, and social distancing. While these measures were meant to save lives, their implementation had adverse consequences on economic activities, particularly in the services sector, the second largest sector of our economy. The uncertainty created by COVID-19 is also delaying the inflow of foreign direct investment to the economy. As expected for most countries, overall, domestic output is projected to contract in 2020 with adverse consequences for domestic revenue mobilization. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, this unprecedented pandemic is threatening to reverse our gains in stabilizing the economy and hard-won economic recovery of the past 24 months. Like most countries in the world, government is trying to strike a delicate balance between saving lives and saving livelihood. This supplementary budget seeks to achieve this objective, hence the theme, saving lives and livelihoods. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, in view of the foregoing, it is compelling that we prepare and submit to this noble House a supplementary budget for the financial year 2020 for the following reasons. Firstly, the outbreak of COVID-19 and its impact on the global and domestic economic activities have rendered the assumptions that underlie the fiscal year 2020 macro-fiscal framework redundant. In particular, the macroeconomic framework agreed with the IMF for the 2020 budget has been revised to reflect the impact of COVID-19 on domestic output, inflation, revenue, expenditure, export, import, public debt, foreign direct investment, official grants, and gross foreign reserves. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, honorable members, unlike the case of the Ebola fight, even before the first index case, the President Bill-led government prepared the Quick Action Economic Response Program as part of measures to respond quickly and effectively to COVID-19 pandemic. The overall objective of the QAP is to maintain macroeconomic and financial stability, as well as mitigate the impact of the disease on households and businesses. The government also prepared a comprehensive COVID-19 health response plan. In this respect, new priorities have emerged that require budgetary allocations to ensure timely and effective delivery of services. Some of the activities contained in these response programs were not provided for in the original 2020 budget. Thirdly, given the urgent need to safeguard macroeconomic stability and to ensure the implementation of the QAP and health response plan, government decisively engaged development partners for support to the COVID-19 response programs. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, due to the visionary leadership of His Excellency President Julius Maada Bio, the credibility of the response programs, and the professional engagement with partners, I'm not only pleased but also proud to report to this noble House and the general public that our development partners have responded positively by providing higher than expected concessional resources and debt relief to enable government implement its response program. The details of these resources will be disclosed later in the statement. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, the key objectives of the supplementary budget are to implement the COVID-19 health response preparedness and response plan in order to strengthen our health systems to save lives, to implement the quick action economic response programs to save livelihoods, to continue the implementation of the original 2020 budget priorities, which will continue to 2021 as part of the recovery effort in the post-COVID period. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, on the basis of the foregoing and other reasons, and consistent with Section 42, subsection 1 of the Public Financial Management Act 2016, I hereby present the supplementary budget proposals for the 2020 financial year to this noble House for consideration and approval. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, before disclosing the details of this supplementary budget, permit me first of all to provide a brief update on economic and budgetary performance for the first half of 2020 and the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. Macroeconomic and budgetary performance during January to June 2020. Macroeconomic performance. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, the widespread disruptions from COVID-19 to the global economy, combined with the proactive measures adopted to contain the spread of the disease in the country, have to a large extent dampened economic activities in 2020. The situation would have been worse had it not been for the timely economic and health response rolled out by government before recording the index case. An analysis of preliminary data of key indicators of economic activity, including export, private consumption, manufacturing output, tourist arrivals, and fare consumption, indicates modest economic activities during the first half of 2020 relative to the corresponding period in 2019. Accordingly, real GDP, which recovered strongly by 5.4% in 2019 and was projected to grow by 4.2% in 2020, is now expected to contract by 3.1% in 2020, largely due to the adverse impact of COVID-19 on key sectors of the economy. Inflationary measures increased during the first half of the year, largely due to disruptions in the supply of basic food items emanating from restrictions on inter-district travel, lockdowns, and COVID-19 induced panic buying to stock up food and non-food items. Consequently, inflation, which had declined by 13.9% at end 2019, rose to 15.6% in March before moderating to 14.4% in June 2020. The trade deficit widened to $227.5 million in Q1 2020 from $164.0 million in Q1 2019, mainly due to a sharp drop in exports. Domestic export fell to $111.1 million in Q1 of 2020 from $139 million in Q1 2019. Relative to Q4 2019, domestic export dropped by 54%. Imports increased to $338.6 million in Q1 2020 from $302.6 million in the corresponding period in 2019, due mainly to the increase in the importation of food and medical equipment and supplies. Reflecting the disbursement of budgetary and balance of payment support by the IMF and the European Union, gross foreign reserves of the Bank of Sierra Leone increased to the equivalent of 4 months of import as at end June 2020 from 3.5 months of import. With additional budgetary support from the World Bank disbursed in July, I'm again proud to report to this noble House that our reserve position will be nearly 6 months of imports cover. The increase in foreign reserves, combined with the directives on forex transactions, as well as the trade facility of $50 million provided by the BSL, relieved pressure on the forex market. As a result, the exchange rate was relatively stable, depreciating by only 3.3% from June 2019 to June 2020. Relative to December 2019, the exchange rate appreciated marginally during the first half of 2020. Monetary policy during the first half of 2020 continued to focus on containing inflationary pressures while mindful of the impact of COVID on the economy. Accordingly, The BSA reduced the monetary policy rate to 15% in March 2020 from 16.5% in February 2020 to stimulate economic activities. Excuse me. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, preliminary fiscal data indicates that domestic revenue collected from January to June 2020 amounted to 2.65 trillion compared to the original target of 3.04 trillion for the first half of 2020. Most of the shortfall of 383.5 billion was recorded in the second quarter of 2020, where the incidence of COVID-19 infections started rising in the country. Whilst revenue collection in quarter one was broadly on target, revenue collected in quarter two was 310 billion, lower than the original target for the quarter. The shortfall in revenue collected during the first half of the year was due to severe shock to economic activity, due to weak tax compliance, and delays in implementation of administrative reforms due to COVID-19. In addition, the granting of income tax deferrals and relief to businesses, as well as allowing importers to use the warehouse duty suspense regime, also contributed to the shortfall. Deferred import GST payment amounted to 11.3 billion. Delayed import duties 28 billion. Income tax deferrals for hotels 4.5 billion, and for mining companies 15 billion. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, total program grants received during the first half of 2020 amounted to 332.2 billion. This includes 119.4 billion budget support disbursed by the European Union and debt relief of 32 billion. Project grant amounted to 209.6 billion. Impact of COVID on the economy in 2020. Prior to the outbreak of the COVID pandemic, the economic outlook was bright. The pre-COVID projections indicated that the economy would grow by an average of 4.5% over the medium term 2020 to 2022. Agriculture and services were expected to be the primary drivers of growth. Inflation was projected to return to single digit by 2022, reflecting the projected increase in domestic food production. The primary budget deficit, the key indicator for fiscal sustainability, was projected to improve from a deficit of 0.6% of GDP to a surplus of 0.3% of GDP. The current account deficit, including grants, was projected to narrow down from 13.8% of GDP in 2019 to 11.3% of GDP in 2020. However, the weak economic activity in Sierra Leone's main trading partners, including China and Europe, and the related drop in demand for Sierra Leone's export, combined with the COVID-19 containment measures, have dampened economic growth in 2020. In particular, restrictions on inter-district movement and lockdowns is adversely affecting activities in the agricultural sector, given the labor-intensive nature of local farming practices. Growth in the industrial sector, which slowed down to 4.5% in 2020 from 7.6% in 2019, mainly due to the weak manufacturing output and drop in mineral export as commodity prices fall. The disruptions in FDI inflows into the mining sector in general is also delaying the resumption of iron ore mining in both Tonkolina and Marampa and commencement of bauxite mining in Poloko. The cancellation of flights constrained the export of diamonds. The disruptions in global supply chains continue to make it difficult for manufacturing companies to receive supplies of raw materials and intermediate goods. This in turn has weakened manufacturing and construction activities. Consequently, the industrial sector is expected to contract by 8.6%. The services sector, which has been the hardest hit, is expected to contract by 12.6% in 2020. In particular, trade and tourism have been affected most severely. The COVID containment measures, including travel restrictions, flight cancellations, and quarantine measures, have reduced tourist arrivals and hotel occupancy levels to almost zero. Social distances, owing to the fear of contagion, and inter-district lockdowns have also disrupted local transport and adversely affected the livelihoods of drivers, traders, and other informal workers. The spread of COVID-19 has also adversely impacted the external sector of the economy, with serious implications for the domestic export. The lockdowns in China and New York have weakened economic activity in those countries and disrupted global supply chains, which in turn has reduced the demand for export, whilst the closure of land borders and disruption in shipping activities have also affected imports. Consequently, marketed exports are projected to drop by the initial projections of $912 million to $593 million in 2020. Imports will drop slightly from $1.3 billion US to $1.2 billion. As a result, trade deficit will widen to $620.9 million for the initial projections of $406.3 million. The current account deficit will widen to $611.2 million, 15% of GDP from the original projections of $466.9 million, 11.3% of GDP. The weak global economic activity and general uncertainty due to COVID-19 have disrupted international financial flows, especially foreign direct investment to Sierra Leone. The emerging balance of payment deficit due to the fall in export, combined with the importation of essential commodities, including medical equipment and supplies, estimated at $120 million. Sierra Leone public debt is expected to increase to 77% of GDP compared to the original projection of 66%, primarily due to the reduction in GDP. Of the total debt stock, external debt will increase to 55% of GDP compared to 47.3% anticipated earlier. Domestic debt will increase to 22% from the original projection of 19.4% of GDP in 2020. Against the background of the widening fiscal and current account deficit, government requested support from the IMF for debt relief under the Catastrophic Containment and Relief Trust, CCRT, and additional financing under the Rapid Credit Facility to close the emerging financial gaps and stabilize the economy. I'm happy to report that the IMF, World Bank, European Union, African Development Bank, IDB, and other partners have responded positively to the government's request. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, taking into consideration the potential threat to the health and stability of our country, government developed the QUAP and COVID health response plan with the twin objective of saving the lives and livelihood. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, before proceeding to report on progress on the implementation of the QUAP and health response plan, I wish to reiterate once again that government commitment to transition from COVID-19 response plan to the implementation of our medium-term national development plan. As we implement the QUAP and the health response program, government and partners are undertaking various socio-economic assessments of the detailed impact of COVID to ensure seamless transition from a response phase to the recovery phase to the implementation of our medium-term national development plan. We do not anticipate having a separate recovery plan to run parallel to the medium-term national development plan, as government does not want to lose focus on our medium-term aspirations, consistent to our commitment to the African Union 2063 agenda and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, the implementation of the COVID-19 health response plan and QUAP will play a significant role in saving lives and protecting livelihoods. The supplementary budget seeks to consolidate these efforts to lay the foundation for economic recovery by continuing investment in human capital development and infrastructure. Accordingly, the supplementary budget provides funding for the completion of critical roads, the provision of electricity and safe water to key districts, and free quality school education program. The implementation of these activities will continue in 2021 financial year to support economic recovery in the post-COVID period. The overarching objective of the QUAP is to maintain macroeconomic and financial stability as well as mitigate the impact of COVID on households and businesses. QUAP comprises 5 program objectives with financing requirements of $136 million. The program objectives of the QUAP, some of which are expected to continue in the post-COVID period, are as follows: building and maintaining an adequate stock level of essential commodities at stable prices, providing food to others-aid businesses to enable them to continue operations and avert layoffs of employees, expanding safety net to vulnerables, supporting labor-intensive public works, and providing assistance to local food production and processing stable food items. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, to ensure the effective and efficient delivery of the QUAP, government established a governance structure consisting of high-level coordinating group and technical working groups for all pillars of the program with clear terms of reference. The Ministry of Finance co-chairs with coordinating platform with the UK Department for International Development and also hosts the Secretarial. A comprehensive monitoring and evaluation framework comprising key performance indicators and implementation milestones has been developed in consultation with relevant stakeholders to monitor the implementation of the QAP and ensure accountability in the use of resources. The key performance indicators, KPIs, and the implementation milestones will be tracked and monitored via real-time online dashboard, which will be updated weekly by the pillar working groups and validated by the QAP Secretariat. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, the first pillar of the QAP focuses on building and maintaining adequate stock levels of essential commodities at stable prices. Through this pillar, the Bank of Sierra Leone launched a 500 billion loans, equivalent to $50 million credit facility to support the production, importation, and distribution of essential commodities at concession and interest rate. As at 15 July 2020, a total of 287 billion, about 28.7 million, representing 57.4% of the total facility, has been accessed by importers and manufacturers. As part of this support, the NRA has also been deferring taxes due to the importation and manufacturing of essential commodities. The NRA is allowing importers of essential commodities to utilize the customs warehouse suspense regime. The usual stringent requirement of commercial bank performance bond was relaxed to allow importers to use bonds issued by insurance companies. The NRA also waived the usual application fee and provide income tax relief for an initial period of 3 months to the hospitality and aviation sectors, which have been added it. These taxes deferrals will account for almost a third of expected domestic revenue. This intervention has ensured the continued availability of essential commodities, especially rice, fare, and other basic food stuff in the country. Furthermore, the Ministry of Trade and Industry ensure enhanced trade surveillance and monitoring of market prices to ensure availability of essential commodities. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, the second pillar of the QAP focuses on providing support to small and medium-scale enterprises. I'm pleased to report that we are far advanced in designing the National Microfinance Program, to be commonly called MUNAFA Fund, for the rest of the country. Nationwide consultation with relevant stakeholders, including NGOs and SMEs, have been completed. Consultation with the Bank of Sierra Leone and commercial banks are ongoing. An amount of 50 billion is provided for in this supplementary budget for the National Microfinance Program at concessional interest rate for SMEs to complement the effort of the Bank of Sierra Leone. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, the third pillar of the QAP is focused on providing support to vulnerable groups. Through this pillar, we've expanded the existing cash transfer program implemented by the National Commission for Social Action from 35,000 beneficiaries to 70,000 beneficiaries, including persons with disabilities. With support from the World Bank, we developed an emergency cash transfer scheme targeting an additional 29,000 beneficiaries, including households affected by COVID and informal sector workers, mostly petty traders, and low-paid workers in the tourism and other services industry. Using domestic resources, we disbursed 4 billion to NACSA for cash and in-kind support to more than 11,000 persons with disability. In addition, this supplementary budget has provided 55 billion for social safety net, covering cash transfer and food assistance, as well as salary compensation for 3 months of workers in the hotel industries. Government is also providing bailouts to Sierra Leone Airport Authority, Sierra Leone Civil Aviation Authority, Sierra Leone Road Transport Corporation, and Sierra Leone Postal Services that were all affected by the closure of the international flights and the inter-district lockdowns. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, the fourth pillar of QAP focuses on providing jobs for youth. Due to COVID-19, business activities have contracted and many youth have lost jobs. Through labor-intensive public works, we rehabilitate about 1,200 kilometers to trunk and feeder roads around the country. This will not only create jobs and support livelihoods for nearly 5,000 young men and women, but also help link our farmers to market. The procurement process for these roads have already been completed. And the implementation of this will commence when the rain is over. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, The fifth pillar of the QUAP focuses on improving local production. Under this pillar, the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry has developed a local food production COVID response plan. The plan focuses on large-scale mechanical cultivation of rice and other food crops to boost local production and to promote livestock production. Specifically, the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry aims to produce 25,000 metric tons of paddy rice by applying an seed area of 10,000 hectares of land for rice cultivation in 10 districts: Sonkolili, Bombali, Moyamba Bond, Pujan, Kailan, Kedama, Kwenadugu, Karine, and Kono. Supporting farmer-based organizations in these selected locations with 70,000 metric tons of seed gas and 3,500 metric tons of fertilizer. Provision of food welfare support by WFP. Provision of pre- and post-harvest equipment. Furthermore, MAF aims to diversify production by providing maize seed and fertilizer to support the cultivation of 500 hectares with projected production of 1,470 metric tons for poultry food production. Providing assorted vegetable seeds to cultivate 500 hectares, consequently increase the resilience of the most vulnerable farmers. Establish a cattle resettlement scheme through the provision of barbed wires for construction of ranches. To achieve the above stated targets, MAF engaged multilateral agencies and other partners supporting the agricultural sector. They were notified about the COVID agricultural response plan, planned activity for 2020, and the need for partners to restructure their project portfolios to make provisions for supporting the local food production under QUAP. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, government made an initial payment for 250 tractors in February this year. Due to lockdowns in manufacturing countries, notably China and India, there were delays in the delivery of these tractors. The first batch of tractors arrived in June, when it was apparently getting late for land preparation on upland rice farm planting. The MAF therefore contracted private tractors owners to support land preparation for farmers across the country. However, these tractors will be readily available for the next planting season. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, in addition to the 5 pillars that focus on the core QUAP objectives already mentioned above, government established a macro-fiscal working group to monitor and advise on macroeconomic impact of COVID-19. This pillar also advises on external resource mobilization. In addition, a dedicated private sector coordination platform was constituted to coordinate tripartite dialogue between government, private sector, and development partners to ensure that QUAP measures and actions reflect private sector concern. It also supports the framework for the implementation of the QUAP to benefit from the resources, assets, and capabilities that the private sector can offer in support of that. Health sector COVID response plan implementation progress. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, government told the Ministry of Health and Sanitation and later the NACOVAC, with support from development partners, developed the COVID health response sector preparedness and response plan. The key objective of this plan are to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, minimize death from COVID-19, protect wider health services to ensure lives are not unnecessarily lost